Hello, it's Mr. Johnson here, and we are talking about our Drawing with Value art project. So, grab your sketchbook, your drawing pencils, erasers, blending stump, and join with me, and let's talk about how to do this. This is such a beautiful example of drawing with value. It's the classic still life arrangement where artists practice drawing with value by looking at simple shapes and forms like ball, like the ball, the cube, the cylinder, or tube or can, whatever it might be. And the idea of this is to set up a light source, have a light shining on the objects, and then drawing those highlights, midtones, shadows, and cast shadows to create the sense of depth and dimension in their subject. So if you look at this example, right, there's the ball that's on top. Um, it's got this nice highlight on it on the left side. So the light is obviously coming from the top left corner, right? The light, whatever it is, whether it's a window, the sun, a lamp, is shining on it from this angle. We've got this beautiful shadow here, and then the cast shadow that ball makes on top of the cube. And then if you also notice, the artist has shaded in the background around the ball, and it creates this beautiful edge here, which really makes that sphere pop out. And then they've done the same thing with the cylinder and the cube. And what I love about this is that the artist here has used the entire space and shaded in almost every part of the paper, whether it's the background that becomes really dark right around the objects and then fades lighter towards the edges, or even this tabletop that the objects are sitting on. And it's light, but it does have some shading added to it. This just helps to add visual interest so that the section of the paper isn't pure white. So there are a lot of different ways that you can add value to a drawing. A lot of different techniques. This first one is stippling, and that's using dots to create different shades of gray. So when you're using any of these techniques, there are two ways to change the value while you're using them. The first one is to make your marks closer together. So the closer together these dots are right here, the darker the shading looks, the farther apart they are, the lighter it looks. The second way to add value with all of these methods is by changing your pencil pressure. So if you press harder with these dots, they are darker. They use more graphite from the pencil. If you press lighter, then they are lighter dots. Uh, you can also use hatching. Hatching is in the second box, and it is these back and forth kind of parallel strokes with the pencil. Again, pressing harder at the bottom, lighter at the top gives you that range of values. Cross hatching in the third box is just what it sounds like. It's the idea of hatching twice. So you do your hatching and then you go back on top of it, crisscrossing that with perpendicular lines that go in a different direction. So that creates a great texture, which is really nice. And then the fourth technique that's on the screen is called scumbling. It's like little scribbling with little circles, but again, pressing harder with those circles and making them closer together at the bottom makes this element darker and lighter at the top. And then underneath this, we have what is called a value scale. So a value scale shows shades of gray from dark to light or from light to dark. And here you can see that each one gets progressively lighter. So if you're doing this with a pencil, that would just be varying your pencil pressure. You press really hard and you make your marks very close together to make the darkest section. And then you just let a little bit of that pressure off each box that you fill in, and it makes your value lighter and lighter just by pressing less with the pencil. So I want to show you how an artist adds value to this sketch. So this artist has a beautiful still life arrangement, which you'll see, of these objects set up. So he's looking at the actual objects. He'll show in the video that they're set up there. And he's already done a very light sketch to start. So before the video begins, he's sketched out where these objects are going to go with very light lines, which is really important. We'll talk about that later. And then he starts adding in the shading with various shades of gray using different amounts of pressure on the pencil. So let's watch and you can see what that looks like. So there's his still life arrangement. So he's going to start with the book that's on the left side. Now, this artist does a couple of things that I really want to point out. The first one is that most of the shading that he's going to do, he's working from left to right in the drawing. Now, it doesn't matter where you start when you do your shading. It's entirely up to you. There's no rule. You can start anywhere you want. But if you're right-handed, like he is, I like starting with the left side of the drawing and moving towards the right, because there's less of a chance that you're going to smudge the work that you've done previously. So by starting on the left side with the book and then moving towards the right, which you'll see he does throughout, he's not smudging his work as he moves on. So that's a really great idea that you might want to think about. If you're left-handed, maybe you start with the right side and move your way towards the left, so that, again, you don't smudge your work. So a couple things I want to show you here. He's adding the value into the objects, which we can see, but he's also adding little bits of value around the outside, and that helps create a space where these objects are located. It makes it look like they're not just floating, that they are actually sitting there. So you can see that with the book on the left. He's doing it here with the roll of toilet paper that's in the center. Now, this video is not complete. So, I mean, he cuts it up a lot. So please don't think he does this entire shading in just a few minutes, because you'll notice that there are a lot of cuts in the video where he does more drawing that we're not seeing. So this does take a lot of time to do it really well. I want you to notice how carefully he is working in each section, right? And each section includes multiple values, right? Different shades from white to black. No area has he just filled in a solid color. The reason for that is that light doesn't hit things in a flat way. So if I take something like this white tissue, which we know is white, and if you look at it on the screen, the way the light hits it, it is bright white right here and right here. It's lighter gray here. There's a little white highlight up there. It's darker gray in the fold. There are so many different values on something, even if we know that it's white. So in his drawing, he's making sure to include a range of values in every area, in the subjects and in the background, right? Even back here, behind these objects, a little bit right down here at the bottom, he's shading in the block that these things are sitting on. He's adding shading down here below. Now, he's going to go back in and add some really dark shading to this section, which I think is so important, because the objects have dark values on them. And if this box didn't, something wouldn't look right about it. It wouldn't appear balanced. So by shading that in at the bottom, he's really giving the sense of balance. And now he's adding some more value, some shadows, right, cast by these objects off the side. I'm going to pause it right here so that we can kind of look at what he's done, and then I'll move on to show you some other examples. So what I think is really cool about this, right, is that you can achieve a lot of different textures with your shading. Here's what I mean by that. This artist has used his pencil mostly, you notice, in diagonal strokes. So you can see them in the toilet paper, in the shadow at the bottom, the shadow up here on the side. And he's decided to leave them. It gives kind of a really interesting texture to the drawing when you can see the marks made by the pencil. Now, if you didn't want to see them, you could take the blending stump that you have and with small circular motions go over your pencil shading, and that blending stump will help smooth out the marks that you've made. So that is one way that you could finish this piece. He's decided to leave the marks there, which I think is pretty cool. So if you look at his drawing compared to the objects he set up, it is not exactly the same. It's really good, but he's made some artistic decisions here, like leaving out the text on the cover of the book. Personally, I think that's a really smart idea. I know in my artwork, my handwriting is bad. I'm never able to get text in a drawing to look as accurate as I want it to. So if you don't feel comfortable doing that, if you've got something with lettering on it, you can leave that out. That's absolutely fine. And I think he's done a beautiful job here at finding the values and then recreating them in his drawing. So that's really what we are looking for. So up on the screen now is kind of the quintessential value exercise. And it's taking a drawing of just a circle. So you might just take a roll of tape, and trace it, or a cup, and get the circle image. And then they've shaded it, showing a full range of values, which gives the illusion that this is a 3D sphere. So here are a couple things that the artist has done here that when you add shading to your drawings, you should look for. So the first thing is the light source. What direction is the light coming from? In this drawing, it's coming from the upper right side. And we can see that because that's the side where the highlight is, and the cast shadow on the bottom, which is the shadow made when an object blocks the light, that is on the opposite side. So that's on the bottom left. So the highlight's on the top right of the object, cast shadows in the bottom left. That means that the light is coming from this direction. Hopefully that makes sense. Then if you notice, he's used a lot, or she, I don't know who the artist is. I don't mean to be misogynistic. So the ball here has a wide range of values. And the artist achieves that by varying their pencil pressure. So you can see very, very light strokes up here to get this light gray, and then it fades darker, again, with heavier pressure and more overlapping lines. Now, if you look at the background, what I think is really cool is the artist does the exact opposite thing. So where the sphere is lightest, which is again on that top right side, the background is darkest. And where the sphere is darkest, the background gets lighter. And that is such a great way to make your subject pop off of the space. So cheat a little bit and shade the background darker against those highlights. I think this is really, really well done, and you can see the entire value scale that they used right below them. So for your project, and I'll give you the instructions in just a minute, but you're going to choose some objects from around your house and draw them. Individually, just choose one thing. Oh, I'm going to draw this, and oh, I'll draw this. So when you start to draw an object, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you have that object sitting in front of you. Don't do it from memory, but actually place it right in front of you and look at it. The reason for doing this is so that you can capture what your subject really looks like, not just what you think it might look like. So in this drawing here of this water pitcher and this book and this piece of fabric on top of it, you can see that first the artist has sketched in very lightly just the basic shapes for those subjects. There's no shading here. He's just drawn in those little outlines so that you know where your things are going to go. That's such a smart way to begin because it's much easier to correct mistakes at this stage than it is once you've got shading on your paper. So I always recommend that you start with a light sketch like this, then add in some shading. So here are some lovely students hard at work on shading drawings of objects. And what I want to point out is that they have the objects right in front of them. So when you have your pencil and your sketchbook out and you're drawing, make sure whatever you're looking at is right in front of you, because that way you'll be able to find all those little details, see the shadows, see the highlights. It's so much easier than trying to imagine what a subject looks like. Here is a beautiful drawing of this game controller. I think it's amazing. And the reason that it's so good is the wide range of values. The artist has been so careful to include white highlights that are just the paper. They've left it. Areas of light gray, medium gray, dark gray, and then dark blacks, right? The sides of the buttons here. And this part of the background is dark black. And it really gives this three-dimensional look to the controller, which I think is just beautiful. Amazing job. Now, this is a great example of really smooth shading done with the blending stump. This is a great example of a shaded object, obviously a bag of peanut M&Ms, and they've been really, really careful to show all of these folds and wrinkles in it. That's just amazing. You can see the range of values not only in the M&Ms themselves, but also in the edges of the packaging and in the shadow that casts on the ground. It's beautiful. So what do you need to do for this assignment? I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you. So there are three things you need to do. The first one is recreate this circle and background shading in your sketchbook. Now you can do this on just part of a page. This doesn't need to be a full page drawing. So this could just be, on the top half of the sketchbook page. That's fine. You can trace something round to make your circle. Again, a cup, a bowl, a roll of masking tape, anything round like that is great. You can trace that to get your outline. Put a line across the background like you see here to give you a tabletop surface, and then try and recreate the values as shown here as best as you can. So you can pause the video here, or you can go back to the larger image and pause that so that you can really get a sense for the values and try and recreate that. Then, when you're finished with that, you're going to choose two objects from your home to draw. Make sure they are different shapes and they both have detail. So at the bottom here, I've chosen that M&M bag and this tube of lipstick. It can be any two objects you want. They do not need to be drawn together. They can be separate. Draw the objects one at a time, really looking at their shapes. So like we saw in that example, start with just basic simple outlines, then we'll start adding the value. Use your drawing pencil and blending stump to add in all of those different shades of gray. Include a whole range of values from light to dark, and make sure that you work slowly. Take your time, right? Shading in a drawing like this is not something that you can just do in 5 minutes. If you do, you haven't done enough, or it's really messy. So make sure that you're taking your time. You can use your eraser to clean up areas, right? I love using my eraser when I draw. I don't look at an eraser just as a tool for fixing mistakes, although it certainly does that, but it also can draw in highlights with an eraser. That's great. Or using an eraser to clean up edges. If I've shaded something and said, oh, I got the gray off to the side here, I'll use that eraser to pop out those edges and make them really nice and clean. So choose any two objects that you have fun with it. Try to choose things that will challenge you. If you do something really, really simple, you're not going to learn anything from it. So try to choose things that are a little bit more challenging. Remember to post some progress photos. So either do these one at a time and post them so I can give you feedback, or if you do just the line drawing of the objects first, you can post that, and I'll be able to give you some suggestions, tips, or any helpful advice that will steer you in the right direction when you go to do your shading. All right, have fun, and I can't wait to see what you make.